This video, we're going to go through the preferences and how to set up different preferences in QuickBooks. I always recommend to people, this is the most painful part of my training that I do for people because it's a lot of information really quick. But what I tell them always is that you want to watch this video. That way, if anything ever comes up in the future, you can say, oh, I remember there was a video on that, or I learned about that, so I know it's possible. I don't remember how to do it. So rather than taking all this knowledge and all of a sudden knowing all of everything that QuickBooks can do and how to do it, just keep in mind that QuickBooks can do this. So you have that possibility. You might not need it right now, but maybe in the future. Okay, so preferences. You go up under Edit and Preferences, and you have your whole list of preferences that you can edit here. And all of them have My Preferences, which are for that user who's logged in. And then you also have the company preferences. To change company preferences, you have to be logged in as the admin or someone who has access to company preferences, has the user rights to company preferences. And you have to be in single user mode to make any changes. Okay. So we're going to start at this video, we're going to go through My Preferences first for each of these. And then in the next video, we're going to go through the company preferences for each of these. Okay. So starting with accounting, My Preference is just, do you want to autofill the memo in the journal entry? Okay. What that means is when you're going here and you go to list or company, make general journal entries, and you put in something in $500 and put adjusting entry, MJA. Now when I go to this next line, I put in here, payments to affiliates. It's going to copy that memo down for me automatically. All right. Great feature, great little additive. A lot of people like using that. All right. Bills, no preferences. Checking, this is on a personal basis. Okay. Do you write checks from which checking account? Checking, savings, petty cash. So what's great about that is that if you are the accounts payable person and you pay out of the checking account, you can automatically write checks and it defaults to checking account. If you're the if you're the payroll person, you want it to default to your payroll checking account if you write checks. Okay, so it's a great way to have it default to the account. But as always, when you go in and write the checks, you can drop down and change it to whatever you want to actually write the check from. It's just the default. Okay, so you can do the same with pay bills, pay sales tax, and make deposits. Your desktop view, you can have one window open. If I change that, it's going to keep it open like that. It means I can't minimize this. Notice that minimization feature went away. Internal, you can minimize the whole thing, of course, still, but just this window. When I go to multiple windows, that minimize feature comes back because I can have multiple windows open at the same time. You have the options here. You can save the current desktop that you have open when you close out a company file. Sometimes that can be great because whatever you're working on at the last time, that's going to open back up. Other reasons why that's great, if you have some problems with your computer crashing, it'll pull it back up to the last thing that was open when you close out of QuickBooks. You can choose not to save the desktop. A lot of reasons why people choose not to save the desktop is because of speed. If your file runs slow already and you have several reports that you have open and you close out of there and it has to reload those reports, it's going to take longer for QuickBooks to load. If you want to save the current desktop, that means the one that you have right now. So save current desktop. So if you want a certain report open every day, exit out of here, open up the report, and we're going to say just run a Air Aging Summary report. Okay, and I want to save the current desktop. So I'm going to say save, okay, and then every time I open it up, this report will be there when I open it up. All right, do you want to show the home page when you open up the company file? So you want that home page to show there. Do you want to show the Getting Started window, which is the little, here's how to create a bill, here's how to create an invoice. Not videos, but just like you click on the button and it takes you to create bills. Also, if you want to show the live community on the side, and if you want the help window being detached, if I click this off, it'll open up in a separate box instead of just right next to it. If you want to change the color scheme, you don't like this sky blue that's going on, you can change that there. If you need to make the view different, you can change the window settings here. I get that question frequently. How do I make this bigger? How do I make, on the bill where it says vendor name, how do I make that bigger? So you have to change your window settings to make that bigger. And then also you can change your sounds. Right? I'm going to save those changes. Nothing on finance. On general, there's quite a bit. Okay. Use enter to move between fields. If instead of using tab, tab, tab to move between fields, you can choose to use enter. Some people prefer using that. Automatically open drop-down lists when typing. Why that's a big one. I like turning that one on for clients. When I go in here to, let's go to vendors, enter bills, and I type in A. It gives me a drop-down of everything A. B, it gives me a drop-down of everything B. Okay. So I like having that turned on. If I didn't have that turned on, it would just say Bank of any city here without a drop-down. All right. Now, if you have a whole bunch of banks or BAs, then you might not want to have that drop-down list. It might get overwhelming. But what's nice about it is I can type in here BAY and it only shows me the drop-downs for BAY. I can choose that one. Okay, let's go back in here to preferences. If you don't like that beep that sounds every time you record a transaction, you can uncheck that there. Some people really like the beep because it'll remind them, oh my, I just changed something or I just saved something. So anytime you're making something post, it's going to give you that beep. Anytime you delete anything, it'll give you that little sound. If you want to, when you're typing, let's say $5, you want to type 500 and it automatically places a decimal point, you want to check that off there. So what do I mean by that? Let's go into vendors, enter bills again. And down here, if I have that checked, if I push 500 and tab, it's going to put in there $500, not $500. If I uncheck that amount or uncheck that box, when I come in and I put 500, it's going to be 500. So it's just a personal preference. Okay. All right. So do you want to be warned when you're editing a transaction? I always leave that on. It's good to, are you sure you want to change this? Yes, I'm sure. If you want to, in the beginning, when you first load up QuickBooks, it has all these pop-ups, right? This is why you're doing this. Are you sure you want to do that? Or blah, blah. And you always check mark off that box. You say, do not show me this again. But let's say you want to be shown all those reminders again. So you can check this box and bring back all one-time messages. If you want to turn off pop-up messages, you check that box. It's funny because you think you don't check it to turn it off. If you want to show tools and tips, you leave that checked, but we don't want to show tools and tips, let's say. So we want to uncheck that. Do you want a warning when you delete a transaction? Yes. And do you want to keep QuickBooks running in the background for quick startups? So what that means is that QuickBooks will basically load when you load up Windows. All right. If you don't want it to do that, then you want to uncheck this box. Then QuickBooks won't stay running in the background. Some people like this checked because then every time they open up QuickBooks, it opens up faster because it's already preloaded. All right. Automatically recall information. So if you want it to automatically bring up the information based on the last bill that you had or the last information you had, you can come in and pull this up here. The pre-fill accounts for vendors, what that means is if you go into your vendor center here, if you go into your items list here, you double click on it. And this is a service item. Let's go to inventory item. All right. And you have the preferred vendor there. You can, it'll pull it up based on that. It'll also pre-fill the accounts, based on past entries. But I like doing automatically recall the last transaction. Okay, because it fills in. First of all, it helps you because if you are accidentally double entering a bill, you'll see, wait a second, this is the same transaction as the last one I entered, the same amount. Maybe I've already got this bill in there. Okay. Also, it kind of helps you too because let's say for a service vendor, 1099, you pull up, it automatically pulls in their last bill and it shows on the last bill they only charge you $25 an hour. In this bill, they're charging you $35. Okay, so I like using automatically, but again, it's personal preference. Which date do you want to use? Use today's date as a default always, or use the last date entered as a default. I like using the last date entered most of the time because, how often in accounting are we posting things to the current date, except for checks? A lot of times with bills, we're posting it to prior periods or, prior days. So I like to use the last date entered. And then with custom item information, so on a bill or on an invoice, if you change the item information, change the price, change the description, do you want it to update the item? All right. Always ask or never. So I always leave that as ask. Okay, so we're going to save those. Nothing with integrated, nothing with items. Unless you're using advanced inventory, nothing with items unless you're using advanced inventory. You can use it if you want the components to default to the same site as a finished assembly. So if you, on a build assembly, if you go into build assembly and you put it to a certain site and you want the rest of them all to default to that site, you can have that set up. Strange preference, I know. Okay, multiple currencies, payments, a lot of my preferences. Do you want the reminders list to show when you open up the company file? You can have that. So it'll pop up that little box reminders list. If you don't like that reminders list popping up in a little box when you first open it up, that's where you turn it off. Reports and graphs. If it takes a while for your reports to load, one thing, call us. We can discuss it. It shouldn't take a long time for your file to load ever in QuickBooks. It's either a computer problem, maybe your computer's a little old, needs a little bit more memory or RAM. The other option is that maybe it's time to move up to Enterprise or start a new company file. So if it's running slow and you are always modifying reports, so you come in here, you say reports, company financial profit and loss, and it takes 2 minutes to load, right? So then afterwards you have to modify it because you really want to do it by month for this year, and you want to put in the previous year too. Say okay, then it'll take another 20 minutes to load, right? Because it's so slow. All right. So if you frequently have that happening, you might want it to come in here and set this prompt me to modify the report before it opens. So what that'll change is that first 2-minute pause while it loaded the report the first time. You'll be able to modify it before it loads. Okay. When a report changes, do you want it to refresh automatically? Don't refresh or prompt to refresh. Again, if you have a slower file, you might want to prompt to refresh because you might be making multiple changes, change, and then you want to refresh after you do all your changes. Otherwise, every time you make a change, it's going to try and refresh, slowing you down even more. Okay. And then on graphs, do you want to do it in 2D and do you want to use patterns here? Sales and customers on time and cost. Do you want to be prompted to add time and cost to invoices? Don't add any or ask. And then also when you go into customers receive payments, right now you don't see this little toolbar here, but if you want to see the little toolbar there on the side, you click show toolbar. Okay. Now when I go customers receive payments, it's got this little guy right here. All right. So continuing on down. Nothing on sales tax, send forms. Do you want to use send forms from webmail or using QuickBooks email? Auto check the to be emailed box. So if you always want every single thing to be emailed or to have the customer automatically be marked that they prefer to be emailed, check that off here. Service connection, giving me the option of saving a file whenever I download Web Connect data. So anytime you connect to your online banking and it asks you, do you want to import these? That's where you turn that on. If QuickBooks is run by my browser, so if you have to log into your bank to download the bank information, and once you download it, you don't want it to close out of the browser when the Web Connect is finished, then you can check that off. Spelling, personal preferences. Do you want to check spelling or not? You can come in here and uncheck the spelling preferences. You can say, you can add your custom, your own custom spelling words. You can say, I want internet, ignore addresses with internet. I want to ignore addresses with all uppercase. Okay. No tax 1099s and no time and expense preferences for my preferences. So there's a lot. So as an individual, you can come in here, set up your preferences so that they are set up the way that you want it and the way you want QuickBooks to function.